Gopal, do you have a new device for flying?
Yep, it's called ADSB.
ADSB. Can't actually imagine flying around without these anymore.
Do you know what ADSB stands for? Cheat if you will, Google if you will. Go and write down in the comments below what do you think ADSB stands for?
My guess will be airplane device in a small box.
That's actually pretty clever, but it actually stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast.
Okay, that's a little confusing as to what that means, but the takeaway is this is a game changer along with GPS. ADSB allows aircraft to transmit their positions in the air to each other and to air traffic control. And even better, it has allowed pilots to use tools to get traffic and weather information in the cockpit.
Yeah, it's not that different than using Waze or Google Maps, right? In the car, it tells you where the traffic is. It tells you where the construction zones are. It tells you even where the police is. Only in an airplane, it's more accurate, more timely, and it is a part of safety.
It is definitely a part of safety. And just like driving with my Waze app, I cannot imagine flying around without ADSB in and out anymore.
I wonder if people realize that there's actually two different ADSB devices, and somehow the government has managed to confuse it. There's an ADSB out, and then there's an ADSB in.
ADSB out has been mandated for a few years, and that is required for any time you are flying around large airports that have radar and tower control.
Yeah, that's because ADSB out is what transmits the location, the altitude, and your position of the aircraft to the air traffic control so they can maintain traffic separation in flight.
This is now essential because aircraft without ADSB out have to be aware of where they're flying because they're not allowed to enter the airspaces where that is required. Otherwise, they have to ask for an exception ahead of time.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? It's for safety. And they want to keep those controlled airspaces very well controlled. So they want to see what aircrafts are in there. Remember, we talked about runway incursion in a previous episode where we talked about even ground aircraft on the ground and vehicles on the ground having these devices so the controllers can see everything.
Okay, people, open up your laptops, get out your tablets and smartphones, and type in global.adsbexchange.com, and you're going to find a map with all the ADSB out traffic out there, color-coded by aircraft, and you can see the location pretty much live.
Now go ahead and zoom so you see, let's say, half the country, and you will be amazed as to how many airplanes are in the air at any given time.
If you find that interesting, share your experiences in the comments and let us know what you think.
And it's not just a fascinating toy. It's not just technology for technology's sake. It actually plays a role in safety. And there are instances where having this technology could have avoided or at least helped in minimizing any accidents or incidents that have happened.
So the use of ADSB has become super essential to avoid mid-air collisions. We've seen in the news that the final report has been out on the Washington, D.C. collision between a military helicopter and an airliner. Factors where ADSB out has not been used as much as it could is definitely going to make the rules on this a little stricter in the future.
The FAA and the government has actually been trying to mandate ADSB for a very long time. Things like technology, complexity, cost, it's not a cheap thing to do, has always prevented the aircraft owners from adapting to this. And that has delayed things. So the deadlines kept changing and changing and changing. Finally, there's now something in place where certain airspaces you must have ADSB. I suspect that this will continue to evolve and get more and more necessary.
For now, a lot of entities are enjoying the utility you can have with the safety tools on ADSB out. They have been incredibly useful in everything from accident investigations to traffic separation.
Yeah, not only that, it's also a very good electronic plane spotting tool. And we're going to talk more about the ADSB in coming up. But for those of you who are aircraft owners or operators and you do not have an ADSB in your aircraft, can you please comment and let us know what your thinking is?
ADSB out, as the name implies, runs through devices in your aircraft, sometimes your transponder, in order to transmit your position and altitude for air traffic control. What is really useful for pilots, though, is the aspect of that called ADSB in.
Remember this device I showed you early on? This is a portable version of an ADS-B in device. Now, this is portable, but there are equally integrated and panel mounted devices that are on some typically modern airplanes.
So it's really easy to use if you fly with an iPad or another tablet. You wirelessly link it in just like a hotspot in the aircraft when the device is on, and your electronic flight bag or your GPS map will show weather, traffic, the position and altitude of other aircraft out there right on your tablet screen.
As a pilot, I think this is the coolest and probably the most useful part of this technology because sitting in the cockpit, I can get all this information so I can make in flight decisions. It is very similar to when using Waze, I know where there's a cop waiting for, or when there's a construction. All this information is now available to me at my fingertips.
And that is the best part of it. So, on your tablet or on your GPS screen, you're going to get all the information, and that will include airspace, temporary flight restrictions, pilot reports, so that you can see weather up ahead or hear about weather up ahead without having to wonder if you are behind the weather updates or having to ask air traffic control. It really is a lot like Waze in terms of getting the full picture from other users in the system. I really like the pilot reports where those out there flying can send in reports of what they see for weather, airspace up ahead, anything like that. And I can see that right on my device.
In a previous episode, we talked about how the iPad has been a game changer in aviation, especially in general aviation. Add on top of that, the ADS-B, now you have all the information you need. Can you imagine that just a few years ago, we had to call a line before we got on an airplane and talk to an actual weather briefer to get an understanding of what the en route weather is going to be? And that's how we used to do it. Now I can get it on my iPad.
That is definitely great for pre flight planning. Now, pilots can self brief right on their tablets before they go flying. And that's still something that we do to prepare for flights. But the game changer is in flight. We can get information updated so much easier and so much quicker because most of us didn't have a phone line to call flight service before the advent of the iPad and ADS-B in for both traffic and weather. And so while the updates for a lot of the weather systems out there are not completely live, and so we caution people to be careful about that when they're flying, it is much more quickly updated than before.
Yeah, can you imagine? I still remember having to call these weather briefers. They will describe something like there is a weather system northeast of you, 140 miles, and you're trying to figure out in your head what that means. With the iPad, you get a very visual representation.
And I think having ADS-B in traffic on your iPad has been probably the most popular feature for pilots because now they can fly around and see all the traffic around them as long as they have ADS-B out. And that's about probably 90% of the traffic out there. You can have their altitude, their flight path, and their tail number, and you can even talk to them on the radio for traffic avoidance. That has been a real change. So nearly all of my flights use some kind of ADS-B in tool. How about you? Are you old school or are you adapting this new technology? Share your stories in the comments.
As great as ADS-B technology is, I think we should mention that there are some drawbacks that's coming in because of this technology. The primary one is over reliance on technology. People are starting to make more, let's say, human mistakes because they're so stuck on their technology.
So let's take the traffic tool, for example. We mentioned it's great to be able to fly around and see the electronic traffic on your screen. But because ADS-B out is not mandated in a lot of open airspace out there, there are still some aircraft flying around without it, which means you won't see them on the screen. You still have to be looking out the windshield to see and avoid traffic. Otherwise, you could be in for a very unpleasant surprise.
Same thing with weather. Let's say there's a fast moving weather system going on. It takes a significant time for the radar to obtain that data, to process it, to transmit it to your aircraft, and for your aircraft equipment to receive it and display it on your systems. It could be several minutes, it could be 10, 15 minutes. If you're reliant on that, thinking that it's real time, again, you're going to be in for a terrible surprise.
So while these tools are so fantastic, we definitely caution pilots to not become children of the magenta line. That's a term we use to caution people not to blindly follow that GPS track that is usually colored magenta on your tablet without being situationally aware of what is out there in terms of traffic, weather, terrain obstructions, and other hazards. If you follow the line, for example, and fly into the clouds, well, those are not going to show up on the weather data link on your iPad. Only precipitation does. So it's examples like that that really drive home the point to be situationally aware outside the cockpit.
And this is technology. That means technology can fail. Your battery in your iPad can fail. The GPS link can fail. Your systems in the aircraft could lose connections with the satellites. And if this happens often, it catches people in the surprise and they just not ready for it. And that's even worse than if you did not have this technology in the first place.
So, this great technology, though, could mean future mandates, and we'll speculate on that a little bit. ADSB out is not required in a lot of the open airspace, but someday it could be because the FAA is definitely focused on making sure that the airspace is safe no matter where you fly, and traffic separation is their number one priority. We also wouldn't be surprised if it becomes more of a mandate for ground operations. We've read the news of some horrific collisions and close calls at busy airports on the ground, and so we wouldn't be surprised if the mandate spread to more airports when it comes to ground operations.
Speaking of weather on the ADSB side, today the government, the FAA, provides subscription free weather through your ADSB links. We have some commercial operators like SiriusXM that is providing it today, and Starlink is getting much more popular with general aviation with satellite based communications while in the air. We suspect that all this may also lead into more privatized information that could potentially improve the latency of the data so you can make more real time decisions.
Another concern is the increased loss of privacy. ADSB out has made it a little harder for aircraft to hide their tail numbers and to block their flights on online tracking, and perhaps that could be discussed in the future.
Another thing we have heard is that some of the FBOs or the operators in the airport are charging fee for aircraft that landed but never even came to the FBO because they can track this information on ADSB. And that's causing a lot of headache and debates in the aviation community. So are you concerned about privacy in ADSB, or you think that the privacy concerns can be overcome because the technology is so useful? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to know that.
If you like this content, please follow, like, and subscribe to this channel. This allows us to create more content and reach a wider audience. And as a reminder, this is for entertainment purposes only and is not to be taken as flight instruction or advice.
Aviation.